So everybody, welcome. This is our community that can benefit from this, and everybody of all ages can be. It doesn't have to be just for kids, which is why I said for all ages. I have a 26-year-old who definitely benefits from adaptations, and he loves to play games, right? And we're all children at heart, or young at heart. So I'd like to welcome Lindsey White. She is going to be the presenter today. She is a certified therapeutic recreation therapist, and she's here representing Holland Bloorview, which is in, I'm not sure the town, is it Toronto?
Toronto, yes.
Toronto, okay. So I will now leave it to you. And at the end, if you have any questions, I'm sure that Lindsey will be able to share her expertise on some of that. So I'm very looking forward to this. And thank you all. Actually, said thank you, but also to the ones that may be registered, but going to view it online afterwards as well. So hopefully you'll be able to get that as well once it's uploaded. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me today. I'm going to start to share my screen, so let me know if you can see everything on there. Can you see that so far? Perfect. I see that thumbs up over there. Thank you, Marla. Okay, so I'm just going to put it into presenter's view. So I wanted to talk a little bit about adaptive and inclusive recreation, and hopefully the point of it is to see what we can do about it and how this can be useful as a take-home kind of idea. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my mouse here. Perfect. So a little overview. I'm going to talk first about the importance of this inclusive recreation and play. I will talk about a few adaptive activities, including technology, switch-enabled toys, active recreation, and sensory activities. Then I'll give you some tips and tricks to inclusion, and we'll wrap things up at the end. So Marla already touched on it a little bit, but a little bit about me is that I graduated from Brock University in Ontario with a Bachelor of Recreation and Leisure Studies. And my focus was on therapeutic recreation. And essentially that highlights the importance of recreation, leisure, and play in the lives of everyone. So I specify in pediatrics, but this is applicable to individuals of all ages and all backgrounds because play is a right. We all deserve to enjoy meaningful time away from work or obligations like that. So I graduated and then I wrote my exam with the National Council for Therapeutic Recreation Certification. And now I work at Holland Bloorview, and I've been there for about 4 years in different areas, including inpatient and outpatient programs. Okay, so I'd kind of mentioned that there's some benefits to this. And so, of course, the most important benefits would be participation and belonging, I think, in my opinion. Everyone wants to belong and be a part of something that's important and meaningful. And in turn, that helps support emotional well-being, mental health, even physical health, and increases our self-esteem and confidence. These themes are even more significant for individuals with disabilities because oftentimes they experience less inclusion and less supports in recreation settings. And like I said before, ultimately we all have the right to enjoy play and recreation and leisure activities. It's a huge part of our lives, and it's a huge promotion. It enables promotion of growth and development. So without play, we're not learning as much. Okay, so the first category I mentioned was technology. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about brain-computer interface technology, which is something that is up and coming, and it is quite fascinating. So we'll go through what it is and how it looks. So BCI, brain-computer interface, is a technology intended to help individuals with limited mobility to interact with their surroundings in meaningful ways. So this technology enables participants to make changes in their environments by using non-invasive electrodes in this headset that you can see. I'll circulate it right over here. This is a headset that is used, and it's got little felts that are hydrated with a saline solution. And these felts are what actually help pick up brain activity. And so these brain waves that are read are translated into data that computer software understands and turns into programmable actions. So here we'll break it down. First, we connect the headset to users, and then we encourage them to teach the system to differentiate between a calm mind and an active mind. And so essentially every thought we have has very different brain patterns and brain waves, and we're teaching the system to understand what it looks like when our brain is quiet or calmer versus thinking about something. In this example, we use swimming. And once we engage in these signals and have the computer understand the difference between quiet and active thoughts, we have the computer actually perform a task as a result. And the feedback or the output really depends on the types of things we're using with brain-computer interface technology. Some examples here, and not an extensive list, but some of the activities we do include controlling some video games that are specifically designed to work with brain-computer interface. We've also used YouTube to start and stop using our minds. So we'll have the participants think their active command of swimming, and then they'll start the YouTube video, and then it'll stay for 10 seconds, it'll turn off, and then they'll have to prompt it to turn on again using their active command. Then we'll also have switch-enabled toys, so essentially turning things on and off using that active command as well. So quiet thoughts would be, let's say the lights turn off, and an active thought or swimming thought would be turning the lights on again. I'm painting using a sphero ball, which is a small robotic ball that moves in random directions, and I'll show you that in the next slide, as well as remote control cars, which we've adapted to be switch accessible and brain-computer interface accessible, and other sensory activities and more. We've also used sewing machines, we've used a blender, and things that really you can adapt to use a switch button. That is what makes these things compatible with brain-computer interface. As long as you can control the power input in something to turn it on or off, you are essentially able to use brain-computer interface. So this page here is some photos of the things I was mentioning. As you can see, we have a client playing specifically created software to play video games using BCI. So he's got the headset on, and every time he thinks of his active command, which again, for explanation purposes, let's say it's swimming. Every time he thinks of swimming, his character jumps in the game, which is really neat. Another photo shows a client turning these fiber optic lights here on and off using her mind. So when she thinks, I think hers was actually when she thinks of her mom hugging her, then her lights turn on and they stay on for several seconds, turn off, and she's in charge of turning them on again. Remote control cars, we've adapted this remote set so that it is accessible for inputs using switches. And so in this case, we're actually using, instead of button switches, we're using headsets. And so you can see some of our clients driving up and down, and some of our staff has tried it as well. Here we have the sphero ball I was talking about, which is the robotic ball that is programmed to move in random directions. And essentially when they tell the ball to start by thinking their active command, the ball moves in randomized areas. It's not yet to the point of being able to know exactly where we want it to move, but it's just an on and off switch type of power. Over here, we have something called the power link, and this is something that's really useful for brain-computer interface, but also just for technology and adaptations in general. It actually controls how long appliances will be turned on and off using a switch. So this is helpful to control items that directly rely on a power source for turning them on or off. So it kind of works as an interrupter when a switch is paired with it. So for example, a blender has buttons, and if you can't use a technology to get inside this blender and figure out when to turn it on or off, what you would do is you would plug it into the power link, which plugs into the wall, and that would serve as, you would turn the on button on in the blender, so it's continuously on and with power, and then once you plug the power link into it, the power link serves as the way of controlling whether or not power is being received by the blender. So you're able to use a button or a switch, we call them, to turn on and off the blender. And in this case, instead of a button, we've used the mind controls, which helps us turn on and off the blender using BCI. I know it's a lot of information. This is the most dense topic, I assure you. Okay. So if you wanted to learn more, Holland Bloorview's Research Institute is always open to research and people looking into things. We've so far successfully implemented brain-computer interface into Windsor, Ontario, Oakville, Ontario, and also Glenview District 34, which is a school board just outside of Chicago. So I don't know if that's something that's interested in it. You can, I'm sure, reach out to them as well to see if that's been implemented closer to your areas. I should also preface that a lot of my content, I've been trying to research both American and Canadian options because I am based in Ontario in Canada. Okay, next topic here we have technology and video games. So video games is a really big part of a lot of youth, adolescents, young adults, and adults' lives. It's a very popular recreation choice. So of course I thought, why not discuss some of the options that exist out there to make things more accessible. So first we start off here with our adaptive video game controllers with Xbox. And Xbox offers the this unique system, and I just believe it's called the adaptive controller. It's about $99 US or $129 Canadian. And this specific item here is what the adaptive controller is, allows you to adapt or attach switches. So these external buttons we call switches are easier for people to select choices because you don't have to use fine motor skills or fine dexterity because you can use your elbow to use the button or maybe steer with your wrist or a head, you know, wherever you place the button, it should be accessible to you. And I'm sure that games that are compatible with these sorts of controllers exist, though I haven't had experience using this Xbox controller. The next one I have here is the PlayStation 5 adaptive controller, and it's about $89.99 US and $120 Canadian. And so this has an adjustable control stick length. It's got swappable buttons, so you can move them into positions that are easier to access, as well as you can place the controller wherever is most comfortable from any orientation on flat surfaces. So it could go on a wheelchair tray. It could go on an AMPS or AMPS pattern mount, which is a standard mounting screw pattern for attaching devices to equipment. So that is the example for the PlayStation. These are the most common video game consoles, of course. And then last but not least, here I have the Nintendo Switch joysticks as well as their Flex controller. And the Flex controller is actually this box here, which also enables you to incorporate switches and buttons into selecting things for video games. So if you want to click using your elbow again, makes it very accessible. Instead of the traditional controller shape, the Flex controller allows additional switches, joysticks, and other inputs to be connected via these ports. In general, I've also had experience and success in using Nintendo Switch joysticks. So these are they come with the consoles, and I have had some experience using them with clients who have maybe use of one hand or less, I would say less fine motor skills. And I find that because they can be used with one hand and rather than using two, it is a bit more accessible. And again, these don't always work for everybody. They may work for some. And I think the best thing is knowing yourself or your child or your friend or family and knowing what works best for them, and also getting them involved in the conversation to see if that's worth them using. Okay, on to the next here. So Holland Bloorview's developed something, called the virtual music instrument. And the virtual music instrument is essentially helping individuals to make music through movements and mostly gross motor movements. So it doesn't have to be, again, fine motor related. It's more related to any large movement, large or small. You can adapt the equipment. So I'm going to show you a video quickly, and hopefully the audio plays. Marla, would you mind giving me a thumbs up if you hear the audio? Okay, perfect. All right. So that is an example of some of the technology that the Bloorview Research Institute works on, and there are many other interesting types of active recreation-based experiments and research they've been doing over the years. This one was a very simple project, and it was created using a software that was developed and a web camera. So very, very simple. equipment that a lot of people have access to. And I think their intention was to get it on the market and available for people to, access, because a lot of these recreation items are not always easily accessible. So to check out more things relating to the virtual music instrument or other research related recreation activities, you can always go onto our website where they have all of their research projects listed, and you can see how you can become involved or express interest in downloading their software, and they can go about that with you. All right. Okay, so next up we have switch adapting toys. So I already mentioned these switches or buttons, and a lot of individuals, again, you can use you can use switches on many adapted things, including, like I said, blenders if you have the power link, or toys using a battery interrupter. So this clip is something short to demonstrate how simple it is to really adapt, specifically in this example, children's toys or anything with batteries, battery operated items. So she has here a little bubble maker as well as a children's toy here. So let's watch that together. And I'm just going to skip through the first few seconds of the clip. Sorry about that. Let me go back. Okay, there we go.
Hey guys, it's Jennifer. Welcome back. My name is Beth, and this is my daughter Alice. And we are going to show you guys how to make some switch toys using a battery interrupter. So what you're going to want to do is get yourself one of these. This is called a battery interrupter, and I'll kind of put it close to the camera so you can see it. I got this on Amazon for about $15. We'll post the link in the bio so you can see what it is. But this is just from Enabled Solutions, and we purchased a AA battery interrupter because the toy that we're going to adapt, the two toys we're going to adapt, take AA batteries. So you're going to want to make sure you have the right adapter for the right batteries. So what you're going to do is go to the back where the batteries are. You're going to pop out one of the batteries. It doesn't matter which of the batteries you take out. And you're going to put your battery interrupter against the positive terminal. So just kind of place it. I know my fingers are hard to see, but just kind of place it right there so you can put it in between the terminal and the battery. So then I'm just going to pop the battery back in. And it does take a little bit of finesse to make sure your battery interrupter doesn't slide around, because it has to block that terminal. And then the best toys to use for this battery interrupter are toys with a on-off switch. Like this one has this on-off switch on it. So you don't want one that has a lot of buttons or one, like if you turn it on then you have to push several other buttons to make it work, because a battery interrupter usually doesn't work with things like that. So let's hope this works on the first shot. So we're going to take our button. I just have this button that was purchased on Amazon from Learning Resource. These are about $50 a piece, but fortunately you can use the same button on lots of toys, which is why I don't solder my battery interrupter to my terminal, so that I can pull it out and use it with multiple toys. So you just plug it in like this. Okay, let me turn it on. So then if Alice pushes the button, so this is just a simple one that you can make from a toy that we already had. And then the other one, and then I just pop it right out and then turn the toy off. The other one that we have is a frog that blows bubbles. This one I purchased off Amazon for around $15–20. And then again, just put the battery interrupter in the positive terminal spot. Hopefully I can do this one faster than the other one. Yep. Make sure it's on. And then I'm going to pour the bubbles in the front. You like this one, don't you? And go ahead and push the button, make him blow bubbles. There he goes. And that's how you make an adaptive toy with a battery interrupter.
Amazing. So that nice, short, simple video actually shows some pretty successful toys and using them. And like she mentioned, of course, it depends on the toy, but even something as simple as that, giving someone the control to turn their own items on and off is huge, especially if we're not able to. Oh, and I should mention that I do have resources to share. I'm happy to share my presentation afterwards. The battery interrupter is still about $15, $16 US, and switches can vary anywhere, switches or buttons can vary anywhere between 50 to, I would say, a couple $100, ironically, but as you know, adaptive equipment can be quite expensive. I would say there's no harm in getting the lower cost options because they are buttons, and like she mentioned, you can use them in multiple sources, even if you have only one. Okay, so next category I have here are active recreation and activities that can include the whole family really in these sorts of games and more physical programs. So I have an example here of adapted recreation equipment. And so I actually run at Holland Bloorview the Adapted Recreation Equipment Loan Program, where we have families come on site to trial a whole bunch of equipment, including the things I've listed on the screen. And once they trial them, they're free to borrow them for up to 2 weeks, as long as they're Holland Bloorview clients under the age of 21. And so this really helps families learn whether or not they enjoy this product before purchasing it, because a lot of them can be quite costly. And some of the things I've listed here include kick sleds, sit skis, and this is a sit ski here, snow blades or wheel blades for the snow, for example, in this photo, all-terrain beach chairs, as well as all-terrain sports chairs, which help individuals access things like the beach or all-terrain uneven surfaces, such as in this image here. This one specifically intended for sand, these large beach wheels. We also have tricycles, joggers, and trailers, so bike trailers, I intended to say there. So this is an example of one of the most common tricycles. It has an adductor here to keep feet or legs separated. It's got these lateral straps, chest straps, rear push bar, so that parents are able to steer and brake from the back, large support wheels, foot plates with straps, and many more. So every tricycle that you'll see has very different modifications and different seating positions, etc. It really depends on what types of supports the individual using it needs. And this is an example of one that's meant for adults. So anyone after, I think the weight capacity is like 400 pounds. So it really is a very, very, they're costly, but it should last, a lifetime. So these, another example, what did I have here? Oh, accessible swings or locating accessible playgrounds, such as in this photo, can be another fun opportunity. You don't really need to remove them from their individual wheelchairs, but you can actually strap them into some accessible playgrounds. And I wish I could zoom in here, but as you can see, this gentleman is actually using this part folds out like a ramp and you slide onto them, and then you safely are able to push them from there in their existing chairs. And so something actually important to note is that transfers, as we know, can be incredibly challenging. So depending on the weight and size of the person we're transferring. So it's always encouraged that you speak to a professional like an occupational therapist, physiotherapist, etc. if you're considering making a transfer that is new to you and potentially dangerous for you or your loved one. We don't want anyone to be, of course, at risk of falls, strains, or anything like that. Okay, so next up here, more active recreation. So not all of these are maybe appropriate or of interest to everyone, but they are things to consider just when we're learning about the types of accessible recreation that exist out there. So we mentioned wheelchair basketball, sledge hockey. This is an example of a sledge here with a push bar. We've got power chair hockey, where individuals actually have attachments added to their personal chairs. And of course, you could add attachments to manual chairs as well with someone pushing. But this is an example here of a stick, essentially attachment being built onto their chair. Volt hockey, which is pretty up and coming here in Ontario. This is an example of volt hockey, where we actually have power or motorized chairs intended for the game of volt hockey, which is really interesting. Hiking and accessible parks trails is something that requires some research, something near you, finding trails that are paved or have gravel, and something that you're able to push, someone in, or if they're able to push themselves in. You just need to make sure that that's safe for everyone involved. In Ontario, we actually have websites that are provided to us to locate accessible parks and playgrounds and trails. So I'm not sure if that exists where you live, but it's definitely worth doing some research to enjoy nature. And last but not least, adapted sailing. This is actually a photo of ours. We run an adapted sailing program where we have these 2-person sailboats. They're small. They're like sail dinghies, essentially. And because they're 2-person boats, we have one client positioned in these low seats. We transfer them in and out of the boats from their personal chairs, and we have a staff or volunteer who is paired with them to show them the ropes, literally, of how to sail, or just to enjoy the experience of being on the water, which to a lot of clients is something they never would have realized that they could have done, but it is something that is more common. We do have more than one accessible sailing program in Toronto, and I'm sure many in Ontario, so that might be something that you can locate near yourself as well, if interested. Next up, I have some seated sports. So a lot of active recreation in general, again, these aren't extensive lists and may not be of interest to everyone, but they are just some of the things that come to mind. And a lot of sports in general, you can use a chair for and modify in different ways. So seated volleyball is a great example. It's the exact same thing, but from a seated position. And if you wanted to continue to play this game, you could play it with someone in a chair. Dance, for example. Dance is something you could end up pushing someone in their chair. You could hold their hands and guide their arms in almost a hand over hand guidance. You could do seated yoga, again with hand over hand. So if someone isn't able to move their arms, feel free to stretch with them from asking them first, and then of course making sure they're comfortable the whole way through. Seated martial arts programs are things that we often see. Bowling using ramps or bocce ball using ramps as well are quite common. Something to remember is that obviously we like to think of wheelchairs as the extension of a person. So we always want to ask before touching, especially if there's someone who's a friend or someone we don't know very well, or just a stranger. I would never go up to someone and hold their hand while they're about to cross the street. So I would never, grab someone's chair because it's an extension of themselves before asking, hey, do you need help? And kind of giving them that choice to express when they need it. So something that I will touch on a few times over the next few slides is hand over hand strategies, and that is literally guiding the hand with every movement. So it could be painting, using your hand on top of theirs, or it could be dancing, holding both of their arms in yours and moving around. And hand over hand is always encouraged with, of course, getting permission. So we would never just grab someone without asking them. Okay, this is a nice tool, a neat tool that's been used in our programs very often. It's called the Overcomer, and essentially what it is this push bar here enables participants to push or move their own equipment using a very minimal motor skill. So you could push it with your elbow, you could hit it with your wrist, you could put your hand on top and have you hand over hand put the individual's hand on top of the bar and have hand over hand to help them guide their motion all the way through. Some examples here are hockey. So you would push this and the stick would move forward. This looks like they're kicking some sort of ball, maybe kickball or softball, I don't know. It looks like a soccer ball type of activity. This one's badminton. And most commonly what we use at Bloorview right now is we use the Overcomer for bats. So we have our baseball bat connected to the Overcomer with a ball on a tee, and that helps with a lot of our wheelchair users, to just kind of use their elbow to guide the bat forward. The only downfall, of course, to this one is it is a bit costly. I went on the school specialty or Flag House website. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a great resource for adapted equipment. And I looked up the comparison of price. In US dollars, it's about $848.99. And in Canada, it's about $1,103.75. So it is quite costly. In a lot of cases, I would say it might be worth recommending to a community center or to a school or to wherever your loved one maybe participates, to see if it could be something that is shared, a shared resource perhaps, or just take, you take turns with it. Maybe you could split the cost with someone else. It is something that's very useful if it's something that you're interested in and enjoy using. But again, the cost can be a barrier to a lot of, as we know, accessible equipment, which is quite unfortunate. Okay, so my next category for adapted activities are sensory-based activities. So my first slide here is about Snoozlin, and Snoozlin is using, I'll get into the name where the origin comes from, but essentially we have a Snoozlin room, which is a room using music, lights, gentle vibrations, and a lot of sensory-based experiences to help individuals relax, choose activities they want to engage in, and just engage in a very tranquil environment. And it's open to clients at our organization. We have our room open to clients, community agencies, schools, and support organizations for children and adults with disabilities. Holland Bloorview is actually home to Canada's first Snoozlin room, which opened in 1992, and it's soon followed by another Snoozlin room in the facility in our hospital. It opened in 1995, the second one, and it was opened strictly for outpatients and communities. So the first one was more for inpatients and individuals who were residing in the home or in the hospital, I should say, at the time, and then it moved open to the community. Snoozlin is actually a room that comes, sorry, a word, I should say, that comes from the Dutch language. So it's made up of two words in Dutch, snuffelen, which means to seek out or explore, and then dozelen, which means to relax or be in a wonderful place. And that's a literal translation. So essentially our hope is to create a quiet, soft, and welcoming environment for a safe space to be created, which decreases stress, increases personal enjoyment, increases positive emotions, and then starts the cycle over again. And again, we are touching on all five senses, and usually we will have either a trained staff member or a trained parent guide the participants through activities in there. And it is just intended to be almost like an escape and a leisure activity outside of reality. That is what it's intended to be, a break from. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tips and tricks. So I have some ideas for you to use in all activities that you decide to pursue with your loved ones, friends, family, etc. The first one I have here is use tools. So for example, in games where you think, oh, I don't know how else to adapt this, you might just choose to adapt something as simple as a dice, or making board games larger so that you can actually use real players as standing pieces. So I have in this example here, you can see someone's used some floor squares, and you might be able to either stand or roll someone in a wheelchair onto their piece of the board game to create an extra large board game and include them in being an active participant in their role. The extra large or inflatable dice is very important because something like that can give someone the choice and autonomy and freedom to make their own rolls and moves. So by positioning, for example, this large dice on someone's wheelchair, you don't need a lot of movement to be able to knock it off of a chair. So putting it on the armrest of a wheelchair is what we do very commonly, and then we'll have the client either shake, rock their chairs, or gently guide, gesture, or nudge the dice off of their chair. If that is something that requires some support with, we're always happy to provide hand-over-hand supports as well, but it is a bit different when you're able to roll your dice compared to relying on someone to roll your dice for you. Card holders are a really big and common accessible tool that is used in a lot of games. Card holders are usually just a piece of wood with different slots kind of cut into them at different depths, so you're able to see them visually in front of you. There are also different types of card holders that exist and that can be created, which you can find on the internet to make yourself, but they're very helpful for people who love board games or card games. Pool noodles are actually something that we use very often as well in physical education classrooms or programs in our facility, and that's because they are usually tucked under arms or in between legs or just in beside the person's chair to help encourage them participate in tag or contact games. So we just encourage, for example, in tag in general, we don't want people slapping each other really aggressively. So we encourage everyone to participate in using a pool noodle. whoever's it. Doesn't matter if they're using a wheelchair or not. And that's kind of something that is important to touch on as well, is it's nice to have everyone play the same when possible. There's no need to single someone out when everyone can play the accessible way, and it can be quite fun to adapt the games as much as necessary by including everyone. Okay, and on to the next here. Perfect. So some additional tips here, and we're wrapping things up, are it's nice to find alternative ways of participating. Everyone participates in different ways. So that might mean you're highlighting their independence and choice making. So maybe they're able to direct their care, and instead of hands-on participating and making their decisions, they're able to use eye gaze to show you, this is my choice, this is my choice. You know, look left or right to show you their answer. Could be verbal by saying, I would like to do this. An example I have here in this photo here is allowing someone to make their own decisions and participate through direction of care by identifying which row they want to participate in. So I've actually numbered our Connect 4 activity, 1 through 7 in this case, I gave this the example, and then the client will be able to identify which number they want to go next for their color. So just, again, remembering that participation looks very different for everyone, and providing them that ability to make their own decisions or giving them the opportunity to participate with hand-over-hand techniques are very, very important for a lot of people. There's a lot of ways to participate, and there's a lot of ways to appreciate participating as well. Adapting items in different games. So if you do need to use a ball, or let's go with the example of a ball. You might want to consider adjusting the weight of them, or the size of them, or the texture of them. So for example, when I'm playing basketball with a client who has limited coordination or limited use of their upper body, if I'm throwing a ball to them, I'm not going to use a very bouncy ball, because that would just kind of bounce right off of their lap and onto the floor. If I could use a spongier ball or something more absorbent, that's easier to, a more adaptable item to toss onto their lap and have them be able to absorb and take onto their lap. And they can nudge it back to me, for example. You could also adapt items by adding in extra items like switches, card holders, and pool noodles, similar to what we had just discussed as well. It's always important to focus on strengths. So if someone's really good at creatively expressing themselves, you might want to focus on an activity that's of interest to them by using their strengths to their advantage. If someone isn't really interested in or able to, for example, write sentences out or write for long periods of time, you probably wouldn't put them into a journaling group. But if they enjoyed art and creative expression, you might find ways to help them tap into their passion by asking them to describe their preferences, or what medium they'd like to use, what tools, paintbrushes, etc. they want to use, what strokes and colors they'd like, to direct their care or engage them in hand-over-hand techniques in something more of interest to them. Again, it's similar to what I just said before. There's more than one way to participate, and many ways to enjoy the way we participate. The last point here is equal opportunity, and that means have everyone play as close to each other as possible in terms of keeping the game the same. It can be fun to adapt the game, but if the game becomes too far from the original, you may want to rename the game and frame it as something else. I wouldn't advertise a game as soccer if it had no soccer balls and had no similarities to the game itself. I might call it something that's fun and engaging, and it can be your own. Overall, we just want to provide as much choice as possible, give autonomy, a sense of control in games where possible, and make sure that there is the desire to participate in activities. We always want to play versus we don't want to have to play, which is the true meaning behind recreation in general. Okay, so key takeaways of the presentation. Hopefully we're able to use what types of resources and adaptive games exist. And you can also adapt what things are not super accessible. So adapt our expectations of how to participate or how participation looks. Adapt our actions and the tools and equipment we use in addition to physical environments that we're participating in. Just remember that everyone looks differently when they're participating or when they're listening, etc. And we want to focus on strengths and interests, and overall provide equal opportunities for everyone. What's offered to one person can be offered to us all. And if you have any questions, I'd like to welcome you to send me an email at my email here, my personal or my work email. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation today. I could open the floor now to any questions if you have any.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. That was fabulous. That was an immense amount of great ideas. I know that some of them that we use ourselves, I'll just, you did review it. I just wanted to show people what other card holders look like. And we've been using a very small one. That's what we started out with. But then when we learned that Aiden loves to play games that require many, many cards, we then went to this wooden one, which holds a lot more. But I really like the one that you had on there, which kind of had a 4 levels of it.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes our games have information on the cards on the bottom and he couldn't see it. So then we went with a clear plastic one.
Love it.
And sometimes we need both because it's that many cards because some of our board games are very convoluted.
Oh yeah.
So yes, there's many, many different options. And I also, as Aiden was finding he liked to build things, I just wanted to kind of show Lego comes in various sizes. This one's actually called Duplo. And it's easier for a hand that doesn't have great fine motor control to grasp it. And you can make towers, you could make anything you wish. So that's just some of the things that we've had great success with. I did note down some of the options because he does love playing video games and he just has not been able to do that because he doesn't have use of his hands. So I might be exploring those switches. But you did say the switches come in various prices from 50 to a couple of $100. If someone were to go out and buy a switch, is the more expensive one a better switch or what?
I wouldn't even say that I know the difference, to be honest. I know that maybe it's more of a longevity or the life of them thing. I don't know that it actually impacts the use or function of what they're connected to. That's to my knowledge. Maybe some of them are specific to clinical items. So for example, maybe they're used for a speech device and maybe some of them make sounds when you press them in addition to programmable sounds. And those sorts of things I think are where they get on the more costly side of things, but I'm not sure that it really matters. And I would encourage you to go with what you're comfortable with. I know it can be painful regardless of spending money on these things. But yeah, as long as they work, that's the most important thing. And I don't have a lot of experience in knowing which ones were $100 versus which ones were $49. So
That's fair. That's fair. And let me just look at the chats here. Jamie Barlow said, thank you. Deb Kierstead said, we're interested in using virtual reality to promote movement. Do you have a suggestion?
Ooh, I really like that idea. Virtual reality was something that we had explored briefly as well, using the VR headsets. And ultimately, it was something that hasn't fully come to fruition at where I work because it takes a lot of staff to learn how to use it before we get engaged with it. But I think that's a great start to really get individuals involved in something they may not have ever experienced. So virtual reality, as we know, is getting quite realistic. And it might be able to put you into a setting where you never thought you'd go. For example, maybe you're in the middle of a tropical island or, very, very imaginative, creative things. And I think that to keep people engaged using the actual physical portion of it, because there's a lot of engaging with clickers and hand technology, I would say hand over hand might be a great place to start with people who may not be able to use, let's say, the trigger on the front of the, what's it called? Remote. I'm not sure what these consoles are calling them, but hand over hand is also a great opportunity to keep people doing things. You can ask them, are you ready to click? Or maybe they can tell you when they're ready to click. I think getting them really close to expressing their own and advocating for their own desires and what choices they want to make is the biggest skill that we can tap into. Because that way you're simply the robot who's processing the request, and they're the ones in charge of taking control. So I think that's a great way to encourage that into individuals' lives. And I don't know if I have too much experience in it, but I'd love to hear more about it. Hopefully it'll pop up.
Yes, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions for Lindsay? You can unmute yourself. or type it up in the chat.
Either or, yeah. And also feel free to make use of the presentation and email me if you have any that come up later on. I'm happy, Marla, to share my slides with you if you like, because in some of my notes I have links to resources, and I'm not sure if that's something you're interested in, but
Right. And this webinar was recorded or is being recorded. So if somebody did wish, oh, you know what, I really wanted to listen to it again, it will be available. Not immediately. We do have to have our staff get it through and upload it to the website, but that will be available on the ULF website. And some other ideas, I'm trying to think of what we did that weren't pricey. Because I mean, of course, cost is an issue these days. Everything costs so much more.
Mhm.
But we made our own homemade Play-Doh. And, that's again more for probably the younger children than adults, but you can use food coloring to color it up and making it as an activity itself. And then it's using some hand movement, which is, they're getting therapy without realizing that they're getting therapy.
Exactly. And that's the biggest part of my role too, is just learning that we learn through play, and we enjoy so much. We gain so much from interacting it with things like in recreation. So I agree. I think that's a great one. And just baking and cooking in general with your loved ones, even if it's something that you have to do, you can make it fun by allowing them to stir things, to hold your hand while they're mixing the dough. I always enjoyed doing that as a younger one. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Yes. And that first one that you did speak about, the brain computer interface, that sounds very intriguing.
It is.
I bet there's probably a lot of people here who have some interest of where that might be going.
I think it's going to probably come up and be a big boom in the next few years, because this tech we've been working on it for, the better part of 20 years, but it's still growing with every year. And this now where it is at, it's come such a long way and it's very usable, but there's still a lot of room for improvement, as you can imagine. So,
Right. And in our son's case, he's 26, so of course video games are, as I mentioned, is a huge role for him, but he can't really play it. I've noticed the Xbox has what you had mentioned. I don't remember, I did write it down, but you could probably remember it more than I can. And we never went through it because we thought, he doesn't have the hand motion very well. But then I see it comes with switches that you can adapt to it. He has a head array that he moves his wheelchair using the head array. And if we could maybe just replace one of those switches to that, he can use his head to do certain things. Would that
exactly.
work, do you think, in that case?
I'm assuming so, because reading here it says add external devices such as switches, buttons, mounts, joysticks to create a controller experience that is uniquely yours. So I'm assuming that these things would be a great way to implement that, right? I mean, I think ideally they're advertising the plug that makes the port that makes plugging things in more accessible, which is fantastic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Good. And you know that one that was really expensive, the Overcomer kit?
Yes.
So it looked like it was like in a sturdy place. Is that something that gets mounted to a chair?
No, it actually can go onto the ground it almost looks like a T. So it stands on
Okay,
the ground, and it actually can be it is a little heavier, on the heavier side, but it can be folded and transported quite easily. I think once it's folded up, it's probably, I don't know, maybe like my head to my chest here. It's not very big, and
right,
it can be, straightened out and folded depending on the sport you're using.
right. And of all those sports that you had mentioned, Aiden has certainly done sit skiing. Uh,
Nice.
so that's been wonderful. He actually actively plays the power wheelchair floor hockey. He goes every Friday. So there are some that have hand ability where they don't have the stick attached, and Aiden is not one of those. So his stick gets attached to his wheelchair and he just moves his chair to be able to move it. So that is all fascinating. It's really impressive how many activities that our community can get involved in. Whereas at one point, I think decades ago, people would be shunned and hidden away. And I love it that there is a much, much more active role that they can play in the broader community.
Definitely, definitely, I agree. Because, you know, we're all human and we all deserve the right to play. And what's a life if you can't enjoy a little bit of sport if you like sport, or a little bit of painting if you like paint, that sort of thing.
Yes, yes, wonderful. And we're all different, like you said, right? We all have different likes and what makes us tick. So
Mm-hmm.
we just have to find out what makes our unique ones tick.
Definitely. We want to make sure that everyone's doing it because they want to, not because they have to, right? That's ironic in itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you all for joining us. I know it's a Sunday afternoon, and in my area, we just had a time change. So it's always a little bit, different when you have to think of that as well. So again, for those that have missed it, I hope you'll enjoy the recording. I thank you, Lindsey, for taking the time on your Sunday to, share all your lovely knowledge with us. Here's a last chance if anybody does want to ask anything specific. I think that's good. There's nothing on the chat group here for you, Lindsey, either. But you did share your email, so if anybody did have a question that they thought of later, please feel free to share that with Lindsey. And if you didn't get that email, just reach out and we could definitely let you get in touch with Lindsey.
Amazing. Thank you everyone so much. Lovely to meet you.